What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Capitalized Podcast. I'm Chris Casella, and as always, this episode is brought to you by our private lending company, Sharper Capital Partners. If you want to learn more about how Sharper Capital can help you build your real estate investing business, you can check us out at sharpercapital.com. I'm here today with Josh Gedrose, who is a husband, a father of 5 boys, yes, 5 boys, and a rapidly growing real estate investor here in Cincinnati, Ohio. He currently owns 29 units worth about $5.5 million, and he's built that portfolio in just 2 years. Josh, thanks a lot for being here today.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me, bud.
Tell us a little bit about your background before you started investing in real estate. It's June of 2024. You started investing in March of 2022. Tell us about your background before March 2022.
Yeah, so spent the most of my career working for the man in corporate America. I worked for companies like Abercrombie and Fitch for a decade, Target for a few years, and then most recently, the last 10 years, I have been a roofing contractor for a local roofing company. I play the role of or serve as vice president there. And we've got a small team of salesmen, and we do roofing and siding and windows and gutters. And so that's what I've been doing the last 10 years, and it's been good. It's been very enjoyable. I've enjoyed that.
So, leading up to that moment when you decided to invest in real estate, you're working in roofing. Did you come across other real estate investors and in your business, or what was the spark that led you to say, "Hey, it's March of 2022," probably a little bit before that if I had to guess, but it's March of 2022 and I'm going to become a real estate investor and start building my own portfolio?
Yeah, so of course there was exposure to real estate investors, and it was like always something that kind of piqued my interest. But I that the gap there between what I knew and what they knew seemed so big that I just never really explored it. I think where it came from for me is for the last my whole adult life, right? The last 15 years, I've just always loved sitting down and watching the true HGTV fixer upper shows, like the flipping shows. Those shows are just fascinating to me. And I always would sit there, and as I'm channel surfing, I'd stop on HGTV and I would just be like, man, that would be such a great job. Like these guys, they go into these distressed houses and they've got all their contractors in place, and they're picking and choosing what they want to do with everything, and they're transforming something that's old and falling apart into something beautiful, and then they're putting people in those homes. Like, what a cool gig. How do you get a job like that? But again, it just seemed like such a pipe dream, nothing that I would ever be able to accomplish on my own. But then over the years, as I was doing this roofing and siding thing, right, I just got more and more familiarized with home improvement stuff and started to build a lot of relationships with different contractors. You just naturally get in touch with contractors. And so something about turning 40, Chris, when I turned 40, a light switch just kind of went off in my head. I had been saving a little bit of money, and I was just like, you know what? I was telling my wife, Elena, at the time, like, let's just do something. Let's buy a house. Our thought process is we're going to go find a house and we're going to flip it. We're going to buy a distressed house. We're going to fix it up. I have no idea how to do that, but chances are we can figure it out, and we're going to flip it and we're going to make like 25 grand, right? That's what we're going to do. So that was the whole idea. That was the whole goal. And that's not what transpired, but that is kind of where it started.
So, it was turning 40. You were like, I'm 40. Some people have a midlife crisis at 40 where they go out and they buy a really nice car. Yours was like, listen, let's become real estate investors. Let's go buy a house.
Yeah, right. Like I've always been, truth be told, like never been I've never had a problem making money, but I've never been good at investing or knowing what to do with my money, and I was the guy that would go out and buy the expensive lavishing car and a nice house and things like that in the past. And again, something about turning 40, something just changed. And I think that, you know, the book that I would highly encourage anybody who's looking to get into not only real estate investing but just anything financially and just grow in life is Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that's probably a book that comes up a lot on your podcast. But I had bought that book back when I was early 20s. And I was sitting in my quiet time one morning, age 40, and thinking about like, what book should I read? What book should I read? And for some reason, Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of was on my Instagram feed. And so I went digging through my house. I've probably got 1,000 books in my house. I went tearing through all the books, found Rich Dad Poor Dad. I had never read it. I owned it, but I had never read it. And I started reading that book, and everything just started to kind of come together. It just made sense. And I was like, where has this been my whole life? And so I really just started to kind of practice and implement the procedures that Rob Kiyosaki talks about in that book, whether it be from the purchases the difference between assets and liabilities, and how he's had so much success in real estate and what that means, and how to buy and hold and all these kinds of things. I would just take millions of notes and journal it, and I just kept reading it, and I would and then I would watch podcasts that he did and different things, and all this stuff. I would just start gathering all this information. So before I ever bought a house, Chris, a rental property, I probably spent a good solid 2 months just educating the heck out of my brain on how this is done, how people are doing it, and what steps to take. And then I just started taking the steps. Like, we just literally took one steps. Like Martin Luther King says, you don't have to see the entire staircase. You just the first step, right? So we literally just took the first step and never looked back, and things just exploded from there.
Yeah, I would certainly say that. I mean, your growth has been incredibly impressive, and you and I haven't even talked about some of these details, although we've known each other for a while. So, can you talk about what that first step for you looked like, and kind of go through the process of actually purchasing your first home?
Yeah. So my wife, she grew up here in Cincinnati, and her in the house that she grew up in, her dad was still living there, right? And he was planning on building a brand new house, and he was really stressed. And he was always, every time we would see him, he'd talk about how he's stressed that he has to sell his house, he's got to move his stuff into storage, and then he's got to find an apartment while his new house gets built. And quite frankly, I was tired of him bitching about it, right? And so one day when we're talking about flipping homes and trying to find a cheap home, because I was all over the MLS trying to find cheap homes, which is not the way to find them. It just kind of clicked one day. I told my wife, I was like, why don't we try to figure out a way to buy dad's house, the house that you grew up in, and then he could rent from us, and then he wouldn't have to sell and move his stuff out, and he wouldn't have to be stressed. And so, like any good idea or any good business plan that anybody could ever have, it's serving a greater need, right? It's helping people. And so this idea felt like it was really going to be helping my father-in-law tremendously, all while giving us a property. And so that was our first leap into real estate, and it was the conventional way. Out of the 29 properties that we have, this was the only one that we did a conventional loan. I went to a local big bank, not a local bank, a large bank, did the conventional loan thing, put 20% down, and bought it that way, and had a pretty significant mortgage. But my father he covered the mortgage. He basically just paid us rent to cover the mortgage, and we broke even. But we owned the property, and so it solved all of his issues, and we now owned the property. And we knew that as soon as he moved out, we would raise the rent, and we'd make a couple $100 a month. And so that was awesome. So we got that one under contract, did all that, and then I'm like, okay, well, how do we get more? And I asked the bank, like, can I do another one of these? Because to be honest, just share numbers with you, I had spent years and years and years saving up money. We had $100,000 sitting in our savings account. That's what we had to play with. And so to buy this house was $330,000. We had to put 50 grand down just to get this house. And so we're down to $50,000 now. And if I want to keep scaling and buying more, I'm going to run out of money really quick, right? So I needed to come up with something strategic to figure out, okay, how do I own 10 homes? How do I own 5 homes without running out of money? And so that's when the creative thinking started to come into play.
And that's a great transition because that's something that I do want to talk about. Before we dive into how you ended up finding ways to scale, the creative thinking that went behind it, the relationships that you built, were there any challenges that or surprises that came up during that first purchase, Josh, that you remember that you learned from and took into the rest of your purchases and the rest of your deals that you've done?
Not so much that one. There's plenty of challenges along the way with a lot of the properties that we've purchased. This one was pretty seamless, because it was, like I said, it was just more conventional. Like, the toughest part was swallowing putting down $50,000, and then go all the hoops of working with a local bank and getting approved. I mean, that whole process takes weeks and weeks and weeks, as we all know. And there were ups and downs. Like, are we going to get approved? I don't know if we're going to get approved. Is this going to work? I have no idea if this is going to work. Like, and so when it finally all comes together, it's like, man, that was a lot. Like, that was a lot. And so again, we needed to find a way to move more rapidly, to be able to. I'm reading books and hearing stories of people that are buying houses with cash and moving quickly and closing in 7 days and waiving inspections. I'm like, how? how does that exist? Like, how do we get that? I want that. So that's, I mean, that's what we've ultimately accomplished, but it seemed like impossible at the time after that first transaction.
Yeah, and like you said, that is something that you've accomplished. It's exactly what you're doing in your business today. So, how did you go from conventional financing, working with a bank? You said that you asked them if this was possible to do another one. I don't think, I won't speak for you, but I don't think working with a big bank is the way that you've accomplished it. What did the next steps look like for you as you started to actually grow your business and scale pretty quickly?
Yeah, so that bank said no, by the way. When I asked them if I could do another one, they said no. I was like, okay, so I guess one door closes, another one's got to open, right? So Robert Kiyosaki and a lot of these big real estate gurus will say is never tell yourself that you can't afford something, right? Just always ask yourself how you can afford it. And so I was developing that mindset and putting that mindset to use, and started reading. I discovered the BRRR method, which a lot of people who are listening to this call probably know that and know what that term is. It stands for buy, renovate, rent, and refinance and repeat. And I discovered that acronym and started reading up on that, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. So people are buying houses and then they're fixing them up and then they're refinancing them right away to pull their money back out. Like, that makes sense. Now I just got to come up with the money to do that. So I think I can fill in all those gaps, but I've got to figure out how I can come up with mounds of cash to buy my first property. And so I started thinking about like people that maybe I could lend money from. Now that's a scary, scary thought. I had never asked anybody to borrow money from them before, and that seemed very just wrong, right? And but it was being around the right people, surrounding myself with the right people. I would meet with local real estate investors here in Cincinnati. I would literally Facebook message them and introduce myself and ask them if they'd want to get coffee with me. And everybody in this realm in this industry is so helpful. Like, everyone wants to grab coffee and tell you their story. And so I started figuring out what other people were doing. And I was having lunch one day with my attorney of all people. And hey, most attorneys have some money, right? And so I was having breakfast with my attorney and we were talking about some other things. And he has a few properties himself. And I was like, listen, there's something that I want to do. And I had prepared myself for this conversation. So I went into it like I was not confident, but I maybe looked confident. I was like, "Hey, Mr. Lawyer friend, I want to. Here's what I want to do. I want to purchase this house, and I'm gonna rehab it with my own money, and then I'm gonna refinance it. And I'm wondering, I was curious if you'd want to get in on that with me, if you'd be interested in funding the purchase, and I will, of course, pay you interest on that. And I would only need to use your money for say 3 months. It's only going to take me 3 months to do." He was skeptical, but he trusted me, right? He knew we had a relationship. We had known each other for a few years, and so he knew kind of just my work ethic and that I was a go getter, and that if I said something, I was going to do it, type of deal. And so ultimately, he decided to take a chance on me, and so he lent me $100,000 at 6% interest for 3 months. It was a 3 month balloon. And this was scary as all get out, Chris, because this is a guy that I know, but I'm also like slightly a little bit scared of him. He's a very intimidating attorney and very cutthroat, and just like he can be intimidating. And here he is lending me $100,000 for 3 months. I got to pay him back 100K in 3 months plus interest. And I've never done this before in my life. And so the first deal was scary. And but my wife was on board, and that is everything, right? She's in my corner, she's rooting me on. You got this, we can do this. If anybody can do this, you can do this. Without her, I wouldn't be where we are today. And we just did this thing. So we got the property under contract for about $90,000, and we had $10,000 left out of the 100 that he had given us. We took that 10 and put it into the house. We put new carpet in, some new kitchen cabinets, painted the walls, some light fixtures, small things, right? Nothing crazy. And then we went to a local bank and we asked if they could do a cash out refinance. And they said yes, a small local bank. There's a couple of them here in Cincinnati that are great and they're happy to do that. And the property was appraised a month and a half later, and it appraised for about $145,000. And so the bank gave us a loan for 80% of that. And what is that? What's 80% of 145? Do you have a calculator with you right now?
I should know that stuff off the top of my head, but I've never been good on the spot, but it's 116.
Okay, so 116. So the bank gives us a loan for 116. My wife and I are driving home from this local tiny little bank with a check for $116,000. I now owe my attorney 100 plus 6% interest, which wasn't much, for 3 4 grand. So we paid him his 103 back. He made a quick 3 grand, and we're sitting here with $13,000. Plus, we now own a house in our name, fully ours. And the mortgage on it, I think, was $680 was the monthly mortgage, and we rented it for $1,250. And so even with mortgage, taxes, and insurance, we were clearing $500 a month, and we pocketed the tax-free $13,000. And we looked at each other. I'll never forget it. On the drive home, we're like, I looked at her and she looked at me, and we're just like grinning from ear to ear. And I'm like, holy buckets, babe. What is this? This is amazing. This is like a cheat code. Like we got to keep doing this. How many of these can we do? And from that moment on, it was, I mean, I just have the type of personality that it's just like, try to stop me. Like I'm gonna own so many houses using this exact procedure. I'm gonna do it over and over and over and over again, and there's nobody that's gonna slow me down. And so that is essentially what we've done, Chris, for the last 2 years. Fast forward to today, we just closed today on our 29th property, and the every single house that we've purchased has been with that exact same process and procedure. Now, my attorney that I mentioned earlier has funded multiple deals for us, 5 or 6 deals just like that. There's been 2 or 3 other private investors that we've pulled in, and all of these people have just been people in my life. One of them is a family relative. That doesn't always work, and I wouldn't always recommend that. You really have to know what you're doing there, and you've got to have a certain kind of relationship going, and everything needs to be documented. And then the other two are just like acquaintances and people that I've known over the years, and just having coffee with them and sharing what we're doing. And what's wild is that as we've continued to progress and have more and more success, like once we did this exact process that I just broke down for you, once we did that like 6 7 times, and we had 6 or 7 rental properties, then it became extremely easy to ask people for money. It's like second nature. Almost every single conversation I'm having now, if I get the sense that they want to invest, or they have money to invest, and they're looking for a place to put that and make some money, some interest off of their money, I pose the question and walk them through what we're doing, and people happily jump aboard. So it ends up being a win-win. And we're now purchasing. We're at the point now where we're purchasing 2 to 3 homes at a time. I think I told you before this call, we closed on one this morning. We closed on one next week, and then we've got another one that we're working on right now. And to be honest, like, it's a little crazy to say this, but Chris, I've gotten to be so confident in knowing that I can find the money to fund deals, that I'll have no problem finding properties now and just making offers on those properties and getting them under contract before I even know how I'm going to fund them. I mean, there's a wonderful outfit with you guys that I could always turn to, because what you guys offer is fantastic. But then there's money to be found everywhere.
I love that mindset, and I'm happy to be somebody's second, third, fourth, fifth option, because if it's behind private money, I will tell all of our clients every time, if you can raise private money, go raise private money. It's going to be a better route for a
For sure.
couple of reasons. Now, there's pros cons to everything, and I think having multiple lenders in your back pocket is a really helpful thing. But Josh, that's such valuable insight that you just provided there, and so many people in real estate are looking to do exactly what you are currently doing, what you've done for the past 2 years, and what you're continuing to do, which is raise private money for the purchase, so have all of it already funded at closing. Hopefully, in the best case, you're also getting the rehab funds up front to be able to work on the property. But even if not, if you can fund 100% of the purchase, keep your costs low, rehab the property, force appreciation, and then do a cash out and rinse and repeat that. That's what a lot of people want to do, the BRRRR method that you described. Now that you know what you know about raising private money, what would you recommend to somebody who is approaching it for the first time? And as a note, you mentioned that you prepared for that conversation that you had with your attorney before you asked him the first time if you wanted to invest in deals. So maybe talk about what that preparation looked like, and then maybe how would it be different today now that you know what you know versus in the very beginning?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very grateful that I had this attorney friend that liked me and trusted me and took a shot on me, because to go back in time and think about, like, have it be the first time that you're asking a private lender for some money, that's a very scary thought. And he provided the stepping stone, to give me the confidence to do it now with a lot of people, sometimes even people that I don't even know, right? But I think it's important that, like, in anything, you have to go into anything that you do with a high level of confidence. Even if you don't feel confident, that's okay. You've got to go in there presenting yourself as confident and having done a little bit of research, or a good amount of research, before you ask a question like that. If you're going to ask anybody, I don't care who it is, whether it be a stranger, a rich uncle, a father, anybody, you have got to know what you're asking for. I mean, this is a lot of money we're talking about that you're asking people to lend you, regardless of the amount of interest that you're offering back. And so I think before you sit down with anybody and ask them if they would lend you money to fund a home, I think that you've got to have a really good understanding of what your buy box is. And by buy box, I mean, like, what part of Cincinnati or what part of your state are you looking to invest in? Why? What's the reason behind that? What's your price range? And once you do find a property, like, how much is it worth today? How much are you going to get it for? How much work is it really going to take to get this thing renovated? What does that work entail? Are we talking like new toilets and sinks and carpet and paint and call it a day? Or does it need a roof? Does it need a new central air unit, a furnace, a hot water heater? What does it need? I want to know. And then what's the house going to be worth after you're done? And I think if you can come to the table with all those things, and so your potential future lender doesn't even have to ask a whole lot of questions, it's just like it's all right there. And he or she can see exactly, here's where my money is going, here's what he's going to do with it, here's when I'm going to have it back, and here's how much of it I'm going to have back. And if he feels comfortable with that, chances are he's going to say yes 90 to 95% of the time. And sometimes you're going to get a no the first time and you'll go find funding somewhere else. And guess what? That guy will then come back. That's happened so many times. Sometimes people just need a moment to kind of think about it, or they need to kind of step back and be like, oh, I'm going to pay attention to Josh and see what he's actually done. He actually does know what he's doing. That's really cool. I think I will invest with him. That's happened 3 times that I can think of, right? With people. So that's probably where I would stop. Those have been my keys to success anyway.
Very helpful. Now, what does the structure look like between you and your lenders? And I know this varies. Different investors have different structures that they create with their lenders. What does yours look like? You might have multiple. So if you could just kind of share what your structures have looked like historically and what they look like right now.
Yeah, they're all different. None of them are the same. Like, as you can about imagine, when I do deals with my attorney, he's very structured, very by the book. I mean, the promissory notes, he draws them up and he's attached to the mortgage, and he's very meticulous about every last detail. And he likes to be as involved as he possibly can be. He's CC'd on all the communication with the title agencies, with the bank that I'm refinancing. He's a part of the entire journey. He wants to know how renovations are going. I check in with him weekly. A lot of times I'll send him pictures. He's very involved. And then there are other people that are completely hands off. They literally will sign a promissory note. They'll wire the money and they're done. I never hear from them again. They never hear from me until we are done with the project and it's time to refinance. I call them up and let them know that their money's coming their way. I love that. Those are the ones that I prefer, and those are the majority of the ones that I work with now, because it's great, because I know what I'm doing now, and I don't need someone looking over my shoulder. I just want to be able to roll with it. And then there's even been even more loose ones, right? Like, I've got a sister-in-law that she's a travel nurse, and so she's always on the go and always on the fly, and she does a wonderful job of stacking money, right? And she doesn't have time to think about investing it, so she wants to invest with us. And so there wasn't even a promissory no. I mean, it was just more of like a family handshake, and we're just out there, we've got her money working for us, and it's making her money, and we cut her an interest check every single month, and it helps her pay her car bills and every other bill, and it's just a win-win. It's awesome. So that one, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that one unless you have a family member that you're extremely close to and there's a lot of trust there and you know what you're doing. Because last thing you want to do is, lose somebody's money.
That is a very fair disclaimer. Now, one of the big mindset shifts, a big part of the shop that we run, Josh, is we're essentially private money raised for you in a sense, right? Because a huge part of our job is raising money from other investors who then fund our business and then we fund other people's deals. A big mindset shift that Grant and I went through when we were creating our business in the early days was we have an opportunity. Right, I think in the very beginning, we were approaching it like, "Hey, could you do me a favor and lend us some money, and then we'll lend it out to other people?" Or in your case, "Hey, would you do me a favor and lend me money, and I'll do this project over here, and you'd really help me." Has your mindset so our mindset changed, and we were kinda like, "Okay, we know what we're doing now. We have this great opportunity to make, passive money with a secure investment, and you're tied to the property via a mortgage. It's relatively low risk and pretty high reward, and there's steady returns." We've totally changed our mindset there. Have you gone through a mindset shift similar to that, or can you relate to that kind of thinking at all, or has your mindset just been a little bit different the whole time?
I would assume that you've probably ramped up your success since that mindset of yours has shifted, right? Am I correct in assuming that? Hundred,
Absolutely.
100%. Yes. Like for I don't know how many the first transactions were like what you described there at first, where it's just like, hey, so was wondering if you could maybe help me out and do this. And it's just like, I mean, even just me asking it like that is not very attractive and doesn't elude a lot of confidence and doesn't really make anybody want to invest with you. Like, I understand where you're coming from there. Asking for money is really, really difficult, right? We kind of associate asking for money as like begging and not and I'm broke, I got to ask you for money. Like there's all these weird connotations there, and it's just so not like that. And I think that once you gain the confidence in what you're doing and you realize that, hey, this is actually serving both parties, I've come to realize that there is a lot more people out there that have money that are looking for a place to put it and grow it than there are people like us that are looking for it to bring it into our business and grow our business. There's more of them, and our my job is just to locate them and and then to be able to position my words in such a way to where they understand that like this is a huge benefit. Like I'm offering you more than the stock market can offer you right now. I'm offering you more than the interest that your savings account's giving you at the bank. I'm offering you a lofty interest rate. Now, when I first started, it was like I was getting like 6% interest rates, 7% interest rates is what I was paying. Now it's upwards of 12, 13, 14, sometimes 15%, in which I don't mind paying that interest rate when I'm only using money for a couple of months. But like that's a great return for people. Like, where else are you going to find that? And so I know what I'm offering, and as do you, Chris. Like, this is what I'm offering you is fantastic for you. Like, you don't, I understand if you don't want to do it, and quite frankly, if you don't want to do it, it's okay. I'm gonna go find another way. But I think once your mindset shifts into that direction, like the opportunities are endless. The possibilities are endless. It's just such a victory for both parties.
Very well said. Another big piece of this, Josh, is finding deals. I think, there's a few different pieces that you need to do the burst strategy successfully. You know it much better than I do because you're doing it every single day. We have our own investments, but you need the money, you need a deal, you need the renovation piece, and then you need to be able to refi on the back end. Okay. Now, you've talked about the capital raising piece. How were you going about finding deals in the very early days when you were building your portfolio from, 2 through 10 or 2 through, I guess, 2 through 29? How have you gone about finding deals up to this point?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And like, so at first it was MLS, right? That's the first thing that people do is they go straight to the MLS and they start typing in where they want to find houses, and then they find one. They're like, oh, sweet, this is a good one. It's a good one. It's like no one else is going to see this, right? Like I want, and it's chances are 250 investors have already seen that, and there's a reason it's still sitting on the MLS. And so while we have bought a few on the MLS, the only way that I've ever gotten them on the MLS is like, for instance, we invest in one part of Cincinnati, and it's Hamilton. It's a suburb outside of Cincinnati that is up and coming and growing, and it's grown a lot in the last 2 years. We set our sights on that area, and it's been really, really good to us. And so I've got a queue set up to where anything in a certain price range were to pop up, I get an email, and there have been times, Chris, where I'm at the amusement park or the grocery store with my family, and something pops up and it seems like the number, I can analyze a deal in less than 60 seconds. And if it makes sense to me, I immediately shoot it to my realtor and I'm like, I want to see this property tonight. And I'll generally write an offer on that property that night. That's the only way, in my humble opinion, that you're going to find much on the MLS that's worth your time is if you act fast before anybody else does. Because if it's a good deal, it's going to be gone within 24 hours for sure, probably less. Wholesalers is another thing. There's a handful of really good wholesalers, at least two or three that I know in Cincinnati that are just really good, honest people that do it right, that are getting houses under contract. And we've developed good relationships where they'll zip them to me as soon as they get them under contract. And wholesalers are fantastic, right? They're out there doing my dirty work for me. They're knocking on doors, they're getting things under contract, and then they're calling me and saying, Josh, do you want this? And chances are I do. And then they're making a little bit of a cut, and I'm getting my house, and I didn't have to do anything. So wholesalers are wonderful. We've probably, out of the 29 properties that we have, we've probably bought 6 or 7, maybe 8 of them from wholesalers, couple off the MLS. And then the rest have been like, this is the big one. This is everything. If you're going to be a successful real estate investor that's going to truly scale, you have got to know how to find off market deals. And it goes well beyond door knocking. Door knocking is, of course, can be successful, but you're going to burn yourself out knocking on 100 doors and maybe getting one person to answer the door. It works, but where we've found a ton of success, Chris, is we'll purchase a property that needs some work, and if it's a neighborhood that we like, that we know is appreciating, I'm out and about a lot. I'm out and I'm checking in on my contractors. I'm out in the front yard. I'm out in the backyard. I'm walking the streets. I'm checking out houses. I'm looking for the houses that are maybe the grass is getting a little bit longer. Maybe the windows absolutely need to be replaced. And it's looking like someone lives there, someone of value lives there, but they probably just don't have the money to fix this up. A lot of times I'll knock on doors or I'll wait for someone that's sitting on their front porch, or I'll find someone who's walking on the sidewalk and I'll just stop them and be like, hey, I'm Josh. That property right there, you've probably seen us around. We're fixing it up. It was a dump before, as you can see, and now it's looking pretty awesome. I love this neighborhood. How long have you lived here? And strike up some conversation, and then eventually ask the question like, do you know of anybody else who would be willing to sell? Because I would love to turn more houses in this neighborhood and lift the value of this neighborhood. It's going to only lift the value of your home if I do that. Do you know of anybody else? A lot of times those people are like, well, I've thought about selling. We've got a few houses that way. Or they'll say something like, well, yeah, Johnny down the street, like I know he's mentioned he wants to sell. Or Rosemary down the street, like just recently passed away, and I know her daughter's inheriting the house. Maybe you could call her. It's like, oh, do you have her phone number? And that is how things happen. And before you know it, you're looking at a house that had no intentions on going on onto the market, and it probably doesn't need a whole lot of work, like maybe a little bit of cosmetic upgrades because someone's been living there. You figure out what the value of that house is, and you come in lower and you offer cash. And so, for instance, I'll just share an example with you, okay? So we bought a house about a month ago, and we were in the process of fixing it up, and it was a dump, Chris. Like, it was so bad. My wife and I tour every single house together with our baby. We've got 5 boys, as you mentioned earlier, and one of them is only 14 months old. His name is River, and River just gets to come along on the journey. He's been in so many distressed houses, it's not even funny. But normally the three of us walk through these properties together. We try to do everything as a unit, and she couldn't even, my wife Elena couldn't even walk into this house. It was so gross, just mice everywhere, just feces everywhere, just filth. And we had got this house from a wholesaler, and we got it under contract. We started fixing it up. We were just doing everything but demolishing it. Like, we tore apart the inside, put a new roof on. We were doing all this work, and we love the neighborhood. We love the neighborhood, and all the houses around are worth a good amount, and they're kept up well. And there's really nothing around that's got what I described earlier, like a house that's falling apart or long grass or bad windows. None of that going on. So, but I still took the opportunity to start talking to neighbors and start talking to people on the street. So I talked to Jim across the street and told him some of the things that I was telling you earlier, the examples. And I talked to another guy that lived right next door. And before long, I find out that there's a home right directly across the street that's beautiful. that the woman that lived there had just recently passed away, and four siblings, four her children had recently taken it over, and they didn't know what they were going to do with it. They were probably going to clean it out, clean all of her mom's stuff out, and eventually get it ready to list. I'm like, okay, bingo! Like this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to hear. So I do some due diligence, find out one of the children that inherited the house. I get their phone number. I reach out to them. I shoot them some texts. I give them a call. That didn't work. So I found another sibling, reached out to that person, finally was able to talk to them, and I got them to show me the house. Now, I asked them, I told them I was interested in buying the house, and she told me, she's like, well, just so you know, like we're gonna get this house ready to list. It's the houses in the neighborhood are selling in the 225, 235, 245 range. She's like, so I don't know what you're thinking, but this house is gonna fall definitely in like the lower 200s. I'm like, okay, cool, that sounds great. So we go walk through the house, and we love it. So my wife and I are loving this house the entire time we're walking through it, and we're just trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out in my head, like, what? How can I get this house for less? Because in real estate, it's all about, you make your money on the front end. You make your money at the purchase, not at the sale. So got to be able to purchase it under market value in order to do the burst strategy. And so what I always like to do is I like to, a lot of times people, when they're describing things, they'll say like, how can I say this? Like, I really fumbling over my words here for a second, but start with all of the good and then end with the bad. So I told the gentleman that was showing me the house, I was like, I mean, I like the house. It's nice. We enjoyed the walkthrough. I think it's got enough bedrooms for us. It's got a nice kitchen, all that kind of stuff. But it needs a lot of work. I mean, it needs a new roof. It needs this. It needs that. It needs this. And so I'm still interested, though. I'm still interested because I am a contractor. So I think that like this kind of stuff doesn't necessarily scare me, whereas it's probably going to scare off several people when you list it. You're going to have to go through inspections. You're going to have to, more than likely, they're going to ask you for money off to do the roof. Things like that are going to flag. I'm willing to bypass all of that, but I would need to get the house for 170. And you can tell by someone's facial reaction right there off the bat if you're going to get anywhere or not. And I could tell right off the bat that they were going to consider that. And so we gave them a few days to think about that. I went home, drew up a contract for 170, sent it to their email, and ultimately they ended up accepting it. Now this house is probably, as it stands today, probably worth 225, and we got it under contract for 170. So we already have a good amount of equity in that house to maybe go in there and put some paint on the walls, maybe change the light fixtures, refinance it with the bank, get our cash out, put a renter in there, and we're done. We'll probably be done with that house in 2 weeks.
Out of all the things that we mentioned that you need to put in place for the burst strategy to work, Josh, I do think, and I'm curious to know whether or not you agree with this, the deal is the most important one.
100%. Absolutely, because there have been a handful of houses that haven't turned out as glorious as my first example. There have been a few houses where we go to refinance and it doesn't appraise quite as well as what we thought, and we weren't able to pull 100% of our money out. So in order to pay our investor back, we had to front some of that cash. That's never fun, but it's okay to leave a little bit of money in a deal. But as long as you're getting a good deal at the beginning, you're purchasing the house where it needs to be purchased in order for you to do what you do to have a successful burst strategy unfold. As long as you're getting that deal, it's always going to work out well. You're going to get your money back. Now there have been houses where I just want them really bad, and typically this has happened on the MLS, right? Where I'll go and look at a house that's been on the MLS, and we walk through it, we love it. It's priced to be on the MLS though. And even though maybe we get it a little bit under asking, by the time we do our renovations and our upgrades and then we go to refi it, we're not in the best place anymore, if that makes sense, because we didn't buy it where we needed to buy it in order for that to happen. And so in order for the burst strategy to work 100% of the time, which it can work 100% of the time, you really have to find houses that are either off market or that you're like locating or getting from local wholesalers. That, I guess, those would be considered off market deals as well.
Yeah, but you direct to seller, though that's the way that I normally I phrase it to exclude the wholesalers. And I will say without a shadow of a doubt that our most successful clients that we work with and the investors that we know who are having the most success have evolved similar to you, Josh, where they know their markets so well. They have a reputation in the neighborhoods and they've built relationships over time where they can go direct to seller and they can get the deals without any middlemen involved. And there's always a time and a place for wholesalers or for agents, and there's a ton of value in those relationships as well. But the most successful people we know get a majority of their deals direct to seller. And I think that example that you walked through was great because the situation that you're describing with this most recent example you gave, Josh, everything you're saying in there is true. Everything you're saying is true. When you do put it on the market, you're going to get pushback from people because they're going to get a formal inspection. They're going to get an appraisal. There's going to be more red tape for them to be able to buy this property if they're going the more conventional route. And there is a value similar to when you're approaching a lender with an opportunity. There is a value to providing ease and comfort and, I guess, confidence that a deal is going to close to these sellers as well, because everybody has their own unique circumstances and everybody has their own motivation to get rid of a property. And a lot of times that motivation is they want it to be easy and they don't want to have to jump through all the hoops of getting it ready to list. You
Well,
mentioned that you work with your wife, that she goes on all the walkthroughs and that you bring River as well. I've been lucky enough to go on one of those walkthroughs with you all, had a great time there. And your wife, Elena, is very involved in your business. So can you kind of talk about what the roles look like for both of you guys in your business and what it's like working or partnering with your spouse in your business?
yeah. Yeah, so we love it. We absolutely love it, and I do have sometimes a tendency, just like with my personality, the way that I'm wired, sometimes is a blessing and a curse, and I'm just like a constant go getter, and I'm just constantly thinking about the next deal and the next transaction, the next path to success, and once we reached millionaire status, because we reached millionaire status after doing this for 18 months, then it was like become multimillionaire. I'm like, my sights are set on these goals, right? And I'm just going, 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 going. And my wife does a really good job of keeping up with me. She can deal with me, thankfully. But there's also sometimes where I go hard and fast, like too quickly, and I need to slow down and be like, okay, she keeps me grounded, she keeps me present with our kids, she keeps me more present in our marriage. And so I've brought all that into the business side too. So I make myself like that. If there's a property that I'm out and about and doing my thing, and a property hits my radar, I want to go see it, and I could go see it like in the next 20 minutes. I'd much rather wait and for her to come join me in 90 minutes or 2 hours, whatever she needs to get out of the house, to come walk the property with me, because she's my voice and ears and eyes of reason. Where I'm pretty confident that I could take on any project. I mean, and we've taken on some real dumps. But we can walk through a property together, and I know from the moment we walk into this house together whether or not we're going to purchase it based off of her reaction to it. So we'll walk in, it doesn't matter if it's in good shape, mediocre shape, or bad shape. She'll make some sort of comment like, oh, this has potential. And when she says that, I'm like, green light, we're making this happen. She loves it. I have her support. Or if she's like, no, this is not it, I'm not doing this, there are a lot of times where I'll try to convince her, like, babe, no, let's finish the walkthrough, like we haven't even gotten into the kitchen yet. She's like, no, I'm not doing this one. I don't like the neighborhood, I don't like the street, I don't like this, I don't like that, I'm out on this one. And i I follow suit. And it's just a really good partnership that we have, because if it wasn't for her, I'd buy everything under the sun, and I'd probably be lay in a gutter somewhere, because I'd be out of money and it would just be terrible. So it's good to have her balance me out. And then I'm really good at just like focusing on your strengths, right? Like I'm good at locating properties and getting them under contract and getting the money to purchase them, and then lining up all the contractors to fix up the house, and then lining up all the banks to refinance it. That stuff, I can do that in my sleep. I don't want anything to do with finding the renters or the tenants, like vetting them, sending out background checks, like making sure they're sending their rent and their deposits, and if they have issues after they move in, like if their washing machine doesn't work or something happens. I don't want those phone calls at all. I want nothing to do with that. She takes care of that entire side of the business, and she's good at it. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she's got some flexibility in her day to take those messages on. She can find tenants in her sleep. She can send out background checks and collect rent in her sleep. She makes it look easy. She just does it flawlessly and beautifully. And I'm just like, I sit back and just watch. Like, I have no idea how you do what you do, but keep doing it, because that allows us to keep growing at a really rapid rate. And right now, I'm actually sitting in a property that we debuted on Airbnb. All of our properties, for the most part, 95% of our properties are long-term rentals. This one was just had some cool, unique potential to it, and it's in a really good location. And so we decided to try the whole Airbnb thing. It was our first go at it, and it's just been wonderful. So we got this place done and furnished, and she runs the Airbnb. She's gotten herself to that super host level. She's such a rock star, and she has this thing. So just perspective, I could have rented this unit that I'm sitting in right now for $1,400 a month, because there's a renter right above me that rents this for $1,400. This one was going to rent for $1,400. It's a duplex, and I would have been more than happy with that. That's total rents of $2,800, and our mortgage on this place is $2,000. So we clear $800 a month on this place if we were to have two renters. But we're Airbnb-ing it, so 1,400 up there, and then here with the Airbnb, it started out a little bit slow for the first week or so, and I was hesitant. I'm like, babe, let's just put a renter in there and just be done. And she's like, no, be patient with me. We're gonna get tenants in here, I promise you. Since that moment, Chris, she has had this place rented every single weekend since we debuted it, except for the first weekend, of course. Every single weekend, and now during the week, she's averaging about $4,000 a month on just this unit. In June, she made 3,800. She cleared 3,800, and in July, I think we're above 4,000 or very close to it. And July's not even booked up yet completely. It's almost booked up. Every weekend's booked up. There's a few other days that we could sprinkle in there. So she's what, tripled, quadrupled the rents that I could have gotten with a long-term rental. And that's just with her sticking to her guns and feeling strongly about it, and me stepping back and be like, you know what, babe, I trust you. I think I trust you. I don't know if I do. Like it wasn't the route that I wanted to go, but she knew that it would work, and man, did it ever. So great having her as a partner. I love it. I couldn't do it without her. I wouldn't want to do it without her. And I've got my roofing business still that I'm currently in, although we've gotten to a point now with our rental portfolio where I really wouldn't have to work anymore if I didn't want to, because the rental income that we've been able to accumulate has gotten us to a place where we can live comfortably, which is just amazing to say that after just over 2 years to be able to accomplish that feat, right? But there's just something so unbelievably beautiful about. Well, I'll tell you this. I can kind of end it with this. I've always said this to people. I think that two of the most beautiful things that you'll ever see in this world is is if you meet a guy or a girl who's with the person that they're supposed to be with. Like, they're married to the person that they're absolutely supposed to be with. They're just such a great couple, such a great unit. Like, I can think of a handful of couples right now that are just like, I love them together. They're great people individually, but together they are a force. Like, there's nothing more beautiful than when you witness that. I love that. And then also the second thing, I don't there's nothing more beautiful than meeting someone that's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing professionally. Like, I mean, a far out example is like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. Clearly, that's what they were supposed to do with their lives. But then there's also someone like maybe the best mailman you'd ever meet. Like, he's supposed to be a mailman. He was born to be a mailman, right? Like, there's a lot of painters out there, but then every once in a while you meet a painter that's like, my gosh, you were put on this earth to paint, bro. Like, you just were. There's nothing more attractive than meeting someone who's found their professional calling, right? Those two things, I just love that. I love meeting people that have found those two things. So to be able to do something professionally with the spouse that you're supposed to be, like, with your true spouse, like your partner in life, to be able to marry those two things together is just it's indescribable. I can't. We're living a dream. We really are.
You can just tell by the way that you talk about it how passionate you are and how well it really does fit, Josh. And it makes me happy to even just be having this conversation. Anybody who's watching this on YouTube is just going to see me smiling ear to ear as I'm listening to you describe this. And it sounds like you guys have a great yin and yang. And I think every relationship whether it's personal or it's professional, or in this case, if it's both, needs that, right? You need somebody who's driving things forward and who sees the vision for where you're going to go. And then you need this other voice of reason who's going to say, hey, I see where you're going with this, but let's do it the right way. And let's make sure that we have all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted, and we have everything sorted out. And that invaluable trait of patience, right? Because as much as we all do just want to go, 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 and there's value to that, the patience and being able to do things at the right pace and at the right time, I think is so important. And it sounds like you guys have that down very well.
I'd like to think so. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your
Yeah.
work.
Last piece here before we wrap up. What is the biggest mistake that you've made from unit 0 to 29, and what is the lesson that you learned from it?
Ooh, gosh. So the biggest mistake that I made, I think it was property number 5. I was starting to get comfortable, maybe a little bit too comfortable in finding off market deals. And that there is such a thing. Like, you absolutely can get a little bit too comfortable with anything that you do. And so I was like, I can find properties anywhere. And so I found a property that was in a neighborhood that I liked, and the house looked distressed. And so I did a little bit of research and found out who the owner was. And I called him up, and I was just like overly confident. I was just like, hey, I see that you own this house. It looks like it needs a lot of work. I'll give you $50,000 for it. And his response was 51. And I was like, okay, sweet. I had a pretty good inkling that the house, based off the analytics and the research that I had done, it was probably worth about 140, 150 after fixed up, after being renovated. And so $51,000, boom, let's go. So I drove over to his house. I sat down. He was a sweet old man. I drew up a contract for $51,000. He signed it. I signed it. We enjoyed a Diet Coke together. And honestly, we kind of became buddies that day. I left. I brought it to my title agency. I got everything rocking. 2 weeks later, we closed on the property, and boom, right? Everything's great, right? Everything's perfect. Well, then we start working on the house. I put a new roof on it, put new gutters on it, started tearing apart the inside, getting ready to put paint on the walls and stuff like that. And I got a phone call from the city one random afternoon after owning the house for about 2 weeks. I got a phone call from the city saying, "Hey, is this Josh Gedrose?" I said, "Yes." "Is this your property?" I said, "Yes." They said, "I'm not quite sure how to tell you this, but this house is actually scheduled to be torn down. It's on the demolition list, and it's going to be torn down in 2 weeks." And I was shocked. I had no words. I couldn't even comprehend what that meant. And it's like, you have to have some sort of mistake. There's got to be some sort of mistake. I bought this house. I ran title with the title agency. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. You can't tear my house down. And so that was the scariest thing that we've ever had to go through. A lot of sleepless nights, because I didn't know if I was going to be able to get myself out of this pickle. And we were probably already $70,000 deep into this house. $70,000 of someone else's money, by the way. And if they tore this house down, this could ruin us, right? This was very early in our journey with real estate investing. And so, to make a long story very short, we went through all the necessary hoops. We had to partner with the city. We had to go into the courtrooms. We had to sit in front of the city council. We had to sit in front of countless people that were involved in this process. And we were given like a certain amount of time to flip this house around. And if we were able to accomplish those goals, then the city would take it off of the demolition list. And ultimately, we were able to do that, but not without a ton of stress. And like I said, a ton of sleepless nights. And all in all, everything worked out. And I'm telling the story as if it was no big deal, but to live it was a nightmare. It's a true nightmare. And I think my learning in all of that is to continue to do your due diligence. Like, as a human being, as a person, and as a professional, I've always not been good with the details. I kind of skim through the details, and the devil's in the details, as they say. And so, even though you find a property and maybe the title is clear and the title agency clears everything and you're good to go, doesn't mean that it's not on the city's demolition list. And so, if you're finding properties that are somewhat distressed or really distressed and you're buying them off market, you generally will never have to worry about this if it's on the MLS, because all that stuff is ran and protected. But if you're just buying a house for cash, something that's off market, you want to call the city And I'll do that now on almost every single property. I'll have a contact there. Now we're friends, and I can just text them like, "Hey, you have anything on this address?" I've got a contact within the walls of the city that can tell me if there's anything on that property that I need to be aware of that has flagged. So definitely something that you need to do, or this will happen. And I mean, think about it. Like if we would have got this house under contract, Chris, and then my wife and I would have went on vacation for a week or two, we would have come back to a wrecking ball going through our house, and we would have been up shit's creek, right? Like this, it could have been really, really disastrous. Thankfully, we avoided that.
It could be a much different conversation you and I are having if we're having it at all, if that happens versus the fact that it didn't. That's amazing.
Well said.
And I've heard that actually a number of times. I'm glad that you're able to learn this lesson without having to go through the worst case scenario. You came really close, but I'm
Yeah.
glad that you were able to do it without actually going through that. Now that you think about everything that you guys have been through the last 2 years, which 2 years probably feels to you like forever and just like yesterday, but you've been through a lot since that first property back in March of 22. Where do you see you and Elena going with your business into the future?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, like from a numbers perspective, like the number of homes that's in my head that always just kind of like a big neon flashing light is 100 homes. But at one point, like I remember when I first started this, I would journal like I want to have 10 homes. My goal was to have 10 homes. So when we reached that, then it became 20 homes, right? Well, then it became like I want to accumulate $10,000 a month in cash flow. Well, once we hit that, then it becomes we want to accumulate $15,000 a month in cash flow. And then once we hit that, it's just numbers just keep increasing. And so I'm not naive enough to think that once we hit 100, which we will, that we're not going to stop there. But I think that like more long term, like more big picture, to be in a place where you're quote unquote financially free, which we're there now with the rental incomes that we have. I want to continue to grow on that because continues to be more and more expensive by the minute, I swear. And then raising 5 kids, like we do need to keep the portfolio growing, but more big picture, like I would love to create an an entity, an enterprise, if you will, that my boys, we've got 5 boys, and I would love nothing more than for them to all be kind of integrated into the business. And together we just continue to grow this thing. And essentially, play Monopoly as adults. I mean, we sit around right now as a family, and I love to play Monopoly with my boys. It's one of the best things that you can do with your kids to help them understand assets, liabilities, cash flow, how to make money when you sleep, like how to buy one house, buy 4 houses, trade 4 houses in for a hotel. Like all that is it's board game-ish, but it's real life. And we're essentially Elena and I are essentially playing Monopoly right now, and we've got 29 red houses, and if you land on it, you're going to pay rent. And so my boys understand that, and they watch us live that, and they're interested in that from age 14 down to age 10. They're interested in it. They see the lifestyle that we get to live because of it, not just money, but just like we go on a good amount of vacations. I'm home a lot. I'm present a lot. I'm at every ball game. I'm at every bus stop. I'm at every, I have lunch with my wife every day. We work out during the day every day together. My kids see that. I think it's very important, and this has allowed me to be able to do that and sustain that. And the thought of having my boys discover that in their 20s, what I didn't discover until I was 40. What more could I give them I mean, that would be the ultimate gift that I'd be able to give to them as their father. And so I think that's where my mind is kind of set right now in terms of what we're going to do with this thing.
Josh, I appreciate you. When we first sat down for coffee sometime last year in 2023, it was pretty apparent within the first 5 minutes of the conversation that we were going to get along well. I think you're doing things the right way, not just in business, the way that you're approaching your business, the way that you're building it, but also in the way that you treat people and in the way that you think about building your enterprise. And it was showcased just right there with your final answer. I really appreciate everything that you're doing, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Chris, I appreciate you as well, my friend. Thank you for the time today.
Of course. Last thing, where can people go to find you if they want to get in touch with you, Josh?
So I'm on Instagram, the Gedrose Group, Gedrose, Gedrose Group. And that's probably going to be the best way to find me, but I would love a follow. Connect with me if you'd like to grab coffee, send me a DM. I'd be happy to sit down and answer any questions and help you along the way.
Beautiful. I'll link that down in the description below. That's all we have for you, everybody. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and check us out at sharpercapital.com. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Josh or the Sharper Capital team using the contact info that I just mentioned. And we'll see you in the next one.